very few exceptions, modern synthetic music is composed exclusively within computer applications called sequencers. These elaborate programs allow the user to manipulate recorded audio and MIDI instruments into an endless array of musical styles and needs. Of the many sequencers shown here, Avid's Pro Tools remains the unchallenged industry leader in the pure handling and processing of audio files. All the scoring stages in Los Angeles exclusively use expensive Pro Tools rigs to capture the outputs of each microphone placed by the engineer. Additionally, Pro Tools remains the standard means of synchronizing sound to picture, and for this very reason alone, a rudimentary understanding of Pro Tools comes highly recommended. With regards to composing music with virtual instruments, these three sequencers are most frequently found in professional composing studios, with Cubase most likely enjoying the largest market share and finest reputation. These three applications have the most finely tuned tools for the manipulation of MIDI data and the management of large sample libraries. To learn one of these programs requires an enormous commitment of time and attention, so properly deciding which one to use is critical. It is a fact that wonderful music has been composed in each, so it would be wise to consider which program feels most natural to you, the user. If budget is a primary consideration for the user, Cubase on a home-built PC would be the obvious choice to get started. The production of synthetic orchestral music can be extremely computer-intensive. Only now are computers getting powerful enough to handle demands of this process within the confines of a single computer. It is still most common to see at least one additional computer networked or slaved to the master computer to assist in the processing. The amount of processing needed is directly related to the amount of instruments and effects chosen to be active in the template at any one time. Professional modern templates sometimes employ upwards of 1,000 active tracks, which requires enormous computing power. When choosing a processor, clock speed is the primary concern, especially when using Mac OS X, which can bottleneck in this area. The audio sample files, which comprise virtual instruments, are stored partly in your computer's RAM, and thus 32 gigabytes of memory is the minimum standard. When dealing with large sample libraries, free RAM disappears at an astonishing rate. Given the size of sample libraries, our third important consideration is storage. Solid-state drives offer the highest performance at the highest cost, while standard internal SATA 7200 RPM drives offer the most storage per dollar. A faster drive will stream more voices. With more voices, you can write thicker orchestrations without crashing your sequencer. It is common practice to fill your sampling drives to no more than 70% capacity, leaving plenty of room for your sampler to stream and host samples in the remaining free space. One of the great recent advancements in sampling technology was the ability to stream from disk, as opposed to solely from RAM. This free space is actively in use by Contact when any samples are loaded. Although not mandatory, it is extremely recommended to purchase an audio interface to use with your new workstation. The primary function of the interface is to translate the digital audio data in your sequencer to analog audio, fit for listening through your speakers or headphones. This is known as digital to analog conversion, or D to A. A professional-grade D to A yields the truest, cleanest audio path, allowing you to make mixing decisions that translate faithfully to other stereo systems. Interfaces often offer the ability to receive audio signals from external sources such as guitars, microphones, and synths, and to send audio signal to hardware units for processing, such as equalizers and reverbs. Generally, higher price units will have a higher number of inputs and outputs, or channels, available that can be used simultaneously. Pianists often need to choose an interface with low latency to best mimic the natural acoustic response of a keyboard instrument. Higher latencies add additional, often noticeable, milliseconds to the amount of time it takes a note to sound compared to the time it was triggered by your MIDI keyboard. PCI interfaces nearly always offer the lowest available latency, while FireWire and USB tend to offer the highest latency. The second to last item you will need is mixing headphones, or mixing speakers, which we frequently refer to as monitors. Studio-grade monitors use flat frequency responses compared to the typical boosted highs and lows found on consumer gear. While perhaps less interesting to listen to, studio gear is meant to display the truest and most detailed stereo image of the track. The hyped bass and treble ranges of companies like Bose and Beats are not appropriate in the studio and are only employed by amateurs or in special situations. Speakers, while perhaps the most traditional way to mix, require a treated room in order to recreate accurate frequency response. And therefore it'd be wisest to invest in a quality pair of studio headphones, unless you can afford acoustic room treatment along with your speakers. I highly suggest purchasing a pair of open-backed headphones like the Beyer Dynamic 880 Pros, which frequent many composing rooms. Your final hardware purchase will be your MIDI keyboard, of which there are basically hundreds to choose from. It is wise to consider your keyboard as the device to get you 70% along the way to a finished MIDI performance. You will spend the remaining 30% finely tuning your performance in the piano roll window of your sequencer. If desk space is a consideration, a 61-note keyboard can suffice, but generally, 88-note keyboards are the easiest for use by orchestral composers. Very often, sample developers engage the lowest notes of the piano to change articulations, known as key switches, and having the ability to trigger them live is a nice luxury. It is important for your keyboard to have a few knobs and faders along with the mod and pitch wheel. In addition to your piano keys, these will be heavily used while entering MIDI data into your sequencer. The Akai MPK88 seems to be a standout in the full-sized MIDI controllers under $1,000, and this is what we supply to our composers at Hollywood Scoring. Tune in for more tutorials from Cinesamples.